When I got the invitation to my sister Melinda's wedding, I sat staring at it for a solid 5 minutes, trying to figure out if it was real. The envelope was stiff and elegant, printed on ivory cardstock with cursive gold lettering. It looked like it belonged to royalty. But then I read what was written inside. Not dear Rachel, not beloved sister, not even +1. It simply read, formal attire required, assigned role, +1 assistant. Please arrive early to assist the bride with her dress and coordination needs. Your cooperation is appreciated. No RSVP card. No mention of my guest. Just a printed expectation that I would show up early and work like one of the event staff. I remember sitting there with my jaw hanging open, rereading it like maybe, just maybe, I'd missed the part where she included a personal note or even the smallest scrap of kindness. But no, it was exactly what it looked like, and I tried to tell myself she was just stressed. Maybe it was a printing mistake. I called her, hoping she'd laugh and explain. Oh my God, Rach, the printer must have mixed up the drafts. But when she answered, she didn't even say hello. You got it right. I need you here by 9:30. Bring flats in case I need you to run back and forth. Oh, and make sure your dress isn't louder than mine. I want neutral tones only. Neutral tones? She hadn't even asked what I was wearing. She just assumed I'd obey. My fingers tightened around the phone, but I managed to calm, I wasn't aware I'd be working at your wedding. She scoffed. Don't be dramatic. You're not working. You're just helping. Family helps. Besides, you're not dating anyone, right? So you didn't need a real +1 anyway. That was the part that stung the most. The casual way she said it. Like it was a fact she kept in her pocket for convenience. Like the years I'd spent building my career instead of a relationship somehow made me less worthy of company, of dignity, of even being seen as a full guest. But I didn't argue. I never did, not with Melinda. She was the kind of sister who turned disagreements into full-blown campaigns, rallying our parents, twisting facts until the spotlight landed on her tears. Growing up, she was the sun, loud, hot, center stage. I was the quiet one in her shadow. Our parents always said, just let her have her moment, Rachel. You know how she is? I knew. I knew better than anyone. Still, I went, because even though I hadn't felt like part of the family in years, I still hoped, deep down, foolishly, that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time she'd say, I'm glad you're here. Maybe I'd get to be a sister, not a servant. When I arrived at the venue, this massive rustic chic vineyard estate that looked like it had been pulled straight from a bridal magazine, I almost turned around. The place was teeming with decorators, caterers, photographers, and at the center of it all stood Melinda, screaming into a headset like she was directing a Broadway show. When she saw me, she didn't smile. She didn't hug me. She waved her hand like she was flagging down a waiter and said, Finally. The veil's creased. Go steam it. And someone needs to move the favors to the table on the left. Coordinate with Brenda. Also, the planner's annoying, so smile and nod, but don't say too much. Before I could open my mouth, she shoved her designer heels into my arms and fluttered off in her silk robe like a deranged peacock. I looked down at the shoes and realized she expected me to carry them, clean them, guard them, like a bridesmaid, but stripped of the title and respect. I spotted our parents across the patio. Mom gave me a helpless shrug. Dad mouthed, just help her. Always the same script. By noon, I'd been asked to find missing boutonnieres, fetch coffee for the groomsmen, and calm Melinda's freak out over the custom napkins arriving in the wrong shade of blush. No one, not once, said thank you. At the rehearsal dinner later that evening, things took a turn from frustrating to humiliating. The long table was perfectly arranged. White roses, gold flatware, velvet runners. Name cards marked every seat, except mine. When I asked Melinda where I should sit, she looked up from her phone and said, Oh, just grab a seat at the end. Doesn't matter. You're just here to support. I sat at the very end. Near the catering team, I didn't mind the staff. They were kind. One even offered to bring me a plate when they noticed no one had. But still, I could feel the weight of invisibility pressing down on my shoulders like bricks. Then came the toast. One of her friends stood up and gave a cute, bubbly speech about how Melinda had always been a queen and deserved to be treated like one. The room applauded. Laughter bubbled like champagne. And just when I thought I could slip away unnoticed, Melinda turned to the crowd and said, "And let's all give a hand to my +1/servant Rachel, who's basically been my emotional support mule this week." A few people laughed. Some looked awkward. My parents said nothing. And me? I froze. My chest locked, my hands trembled. It wasn't even the insult. It was the fact that she said it like it was funny, like she'd given me a role to be proud of. And no one stopped her. No one stood up for me. I excused myself to the bathroom but didn't go there. I walked straight out onto the back patio and collapsed onto a bench beneath a vine-covered trellis. I stared at the string lights and the stars and the soft flicker of lanterns across the lawn. The kind of venue most brides only dream about. Except Melinda didn't dream about it. She didn't find it. I did. She didn't know it. But 3 months earlier, I had signed on as a silent partner in a luxury venue investment group. The vineyard she was using for her wedding, ours, mine, bought quietly, silently, because my firm had an eye for untapped prestige properties. She never bothered to ask how she'd gotten the deal of the year. She just assumed the universe adored her, that fate always served her the finest grapes on a silver platter. But now, I looked at the estate differently, not as a guest, not even as a sister, but as the owner. And as I watched Melinda clinking glasses and basking in her bridal glow, I realized something with total icy clarity. She hadn't just humiliated me. She'd done it on land that had my name written into the deed. And that was going to be her biggest mistake yet. The morning of the wedding rehearsal was soaked in sunshine, but all I felt was cold. I had barely slept the night before, tossing and turning while my mind replayed the moment my sister, Camilla, had looked me straight in the eye and called me her +1 servant, as if I were some nameless extra in her life, a tag-along meant to fill space but never belong. The words hadn't just stung, they'd cracked something open in me, something buried deep that had quietly taken blow after blow for years. I still showed up early that morning, dressed in a navy dress she'd insisted I wear. Nothing flashy, just appropriate enough to blend in. Her words, not mine. I arrived before most guests, thinking maybe it was a chance to help, to make myself useful, to salvage some piece of this nightmare. But when I walked in, the chaos was already in motion. Camilla's fiancé, Jeremy, was shouting at a vendor about floral arrangements. Her bridesmaids sipped mimosas on white velvet lounge chairs that had been specially delivered for photo ops. My mother was critiquing the pastry table. No one noticed I had arrived. Again. And yet, when the planner rushed in with panic in her voice, looking for someone to help ferry the elderly guests from the parking lot, everyone turned to me. "Eliza, can you?" Camilla asked sweetly, flashing a smile like she hadn't reduced me to nothing just a day ago. "You're always good at helping." Helping. That's what I did. That's what I had always done. I helped move chairs. I helped corral distant relatives. I helped fix Camilla's makeup when she cried about her dress. Not fitting right, even though it fit perfectly. I helped soothe Jeremy's anxiety over a missing cufflink. I helped, and I helped, and I helped, until my feet were sore, my hands were shaking, and my pride had dissolved into the wedding decor, like invisible ink. During the family rehearsal dinner that night, things reached their boiling point. They seated me, of course, at the far end of the table, between my cousin's date and the teenage flower girl who wouldn't stop texting. Camilla stood up, clinking her glass, and raised a toast. I just want to thank everyone who helped bring this vision to life. My amazing bridesmaids, my wonderful groom, and, of course, my mother, for organizing everything to perfection. She scanned the room and then added with a grin, "Oh, and Eliza, for being the most dedicated +1 anyone could ask for." The table laughed. The moment twisted in slow motion. People chuckled, sipped their wine, and looked at me with amused sympathy. Camilla was glowing, delighted by her own insult disguised as a joke. I swallowed the lump in my throat and faked a smile so forced it made my jaw ache. But inside, something shifted. Something broke in a permanent way. After dinner, I slipped away. Not to cry, not to sulk, but to think. In the quiet courtyard outside the venue, I sat under a string of hanging lights and remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. 3 years ago, I had taken a business class at night while working 2 jobs. I had built a small wedding coordination startup on the side, quietly, with no clients yet, just a dream. When Camilla got engaged, I offered to help as a professional, as a partner. She laughed and said, "No offense, but I need someone with a little more experience." So I let it go. I let a lot of things go. But last month, before she even knew I was invited to the wedding, I had been called by the venue's owner. Apparently, they were looking to expand and partner with a new planner, someone who could handle high-stress events. I had interviewed, presented a pitch, even offered to take one chaotic wedding off their hands at no cost as a test run. That wedding was Camilla's, and they had agreed, quietly, legally. I had signed the papers 2 weeks before the ceremony. I wasn't just some +1. I wasn't a background helper. I was the new event partner, and after the wedding, I would be holding the keys to the venue she had spent her life bragging about booking. I looked at the glowing windows behind me, filled with laughter, champagne, and a family that still didn't see me. But they would. Oh, they would. The morning of the wedding arrived with a deceptive peace. The skies were clear, the vineyards glowed under the warm light, and guests trickled into the venue with excitement written across their faces. The kind of day every bride prays for. The kind of day Camilla believed belonged to her, and only her. Inside the bridal suite, chaos disguised itself as glamour. Camilla's laughter echoed against the tall mirrors as her makeup artist powdered her already flawless face. "Can someone check if the harpist is here yet?" she called out like she was commanding a castle staff. "And Eliza, be a dear and double-check the gift table. Some of the cards look disorganized." She didn't even look at me, just flicked her hand like I was part of the decor. By then, I had grown numb to her small humiliations. It was like being slowly frozen from the inside, watching yourself fade into a role that didn't belong to you, but one you were forced to wear like an ill-fitting uniform. I did as she asked, quietly, professionally. And just before the ceremony, while the guests began to settle into their seats and the music softly began, the venue manager, Lucia, approached me with a clipboard and a knowing smile. "Ready?" she asked in a hushed voice. I nodded, not out of nerves, but out of sheer resolve. The surprise was simple, brilliant even. Camilla's wedding program, beautifully printed, tied with a pale pink ribbon, had been updated at the last minute. Lucia and I had finalized it during the rehearsal dinner. Each guest would receive a card on their seat. But these weren't ordinary programs. They were announcements. On the back, beneath the bridal party listing and the dinner schedule in crisp ink, was the following message. "This event is proudly hosted in collaboration with Emberlight Events, under the leadership of Eliza Morgan, event director and co-owner of Emberlight's newest premier venue." Not only was I no longer her +1 servant, I was the person who had delivered the experience she believed she curated herself. The cards had already been placed. The guests had already begun to read them. I watched the whispers spread from seat to seat like wildfire across a dry field. brows raised, heads turned, and slowly, deliberately, eyes began to scan the crowd, looking for me. Inside, Camilla was blissfully unaware. She was too busy posing with the bridesmaids, adjusting her veil like she was the star of a royal film. When she stepped onto the aisle, the music swelled, and every guest stood. Except this time they didn't stand just for her. Some stood in recognition of me. Some smiled when they spotted me near the entrance, where I stood with the venue staff. Not because I was managing chaos, but because I was being silently honored. And Camilla? She noticed. She saw the shift, saw the attention drawn away. Her eyes darted between the audience, confused, flustered, until she spotted the program in her maid of honor's hand. She tried to snatch it, but it was too late. Her face twisted in slow horror as she read the sentence. Just one, but one that rewrote the entire narrative she thought she had scripted. Her steps down the aisle were clunky, distracted. Her smile cracked. And for the first time ever, she looked small. After the ceremony, as guests sipped champagne and took selfies under the trellises, I mingled with the venue staff, my staff. The same caterers who had ignored me at the rehearsal now offered me updates with the utmost professionalism. The bartender called me ma'am. The DJ asked if I wanted to say a few words before the couple's first dance. Camilla found me before the reception started. She pulled me behind the photo booth curtain with hands that trembled with rage. "What the hell did you do?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I did exactly what you asked," I said calmly. "I helped, I worked, I supported. I gave you the perfect wedding. And in return, I gave myself the one thing you never would." She blinked, lips parted. "And what's that?" "Respect." Her cheeks flushed, then paled. "You used my wedding as a platform?" This was my day, Eliza." "No, Camilla," I said, stepping closer. "It was your stage, but it was my show. You just didn't read the fine print." She stormed off, and I let her. At the reception, I stood in the back as Camilla delivered a bitter, half-hearted thank you speech. Her voice cracked. Her smiles felt forced. But the guests weren't looking at her with the same adoration anymore. There was a new curiosity, a new story beneath the lace and twinkle lights, and I was its center. One guest, a well-known lifestyle blogger, approached me before dessert. "I had no idea you ran Emberlight," she said. "That was poetic." "It wasn't planned," I replied honestly, "but it was earned." When the evening ended, Camilla didn't say goodbye to me. My parents tried to play neutral, whispering things like, "You girls just need time." But I didn't respond, because this wasn't about time anymore. This was about truth. And the truth was, I was never just the plus one. I was the force behind the scene, the architect, the one who carried grace on her back while being handed bricks made of mockery. And now, I was something else entirely. I was the name printed on the contract. I was the line that made her voice shake. I was the one who turned her greatest insult into my finest revenge. The day after the wedding felt like stepping out of a storm into silence. The estate grounds were calm again, the guests had gone, the rented flowers wilted in buckets waiting for disposal. I arrived not as a sister, not as someone recovering from emotional bruises, but as a businesswoman coming to debrief her first official event. The staff greeted me with a respect I hadn't yet grown used to. "Ms. Morgan, congratulations. Your team handled everything flawlessly." One of the coordinators handed me a clipboard. "Oh, and your sister's husband left behind his cufflinks. Do you want to return them?" I didn't even flinch. "No," I said. "Mail them to their address on file. Professional courtesy." By the time I stepped into the main ballroom, it was empty. But not for long. My mother was waiting near the bar. "Eliza," she said gently, as if she were trying to approach a wild animal, Your sister is very upset." I didn't answer. I walked past her to the bar, poured a black coffee from the urn left behind by catering, and took a sip before meeting her gaze. "She's humiliated," my mother continued. "Do you have any idea what it looked like? You overshadowed her. At her own wedding." I let out the softest laugh, bitter like the coffee. "You mean the wedding where she called me her servant in front of 75 guests? Or are you talking about the part where she erased my existence for 3 straight days while I planned and executed her entire fantasy?" My mother's face tightened. "You could have said something." "I did," I replied coldly. "For the past 20 years, none of you listened." She hesitated. "This wasn't the time." "No, Mom," I said, placing the coffee down. "This was exactly the time. Because if I didn't take just one moment of power back, you would have all gone on pretending like I was just the side character to her perfect little movie." She looked down, suddenly small. "You should have told us about the business." I stepped closer. "Why? So you could disapprove early? So Camilla could laugh and say I was trying to copy her again? I built something real, without help, without applause. And when I finally used it for something that mattered, to me, you all saw it as sabotage." For once, my mother didn't have a comeback. She just turned and left, shoulders low, retreating like someone who'd been reminded of something they didn't want to believe. I didn't chase her. I didn't soften. Because this time my silence wasn't submission. It was power. That week, something changed. Phone calls from family went unanswered. Invitations I once begged for were rescinded in bitter silence. My father sent a long email about family unity and disappointment, but never once asked me how I felt. Camilla posted a curated highlight reel of her wedding online, tagging every vendor, every friend, but somehow skipping Emberlight events altogether. Her way of erasing me again. But then, something unexpected happened. A famous wedding photographer who had been a guest reached out. She'd been at the event, not as a vendor, but as a +1 herself, married to a groomsman. She had seen how I operated behind the scenes, how I managed the entire wedding without flinching through humiliation. "You handled it with elegance," she said. "I'd like to feature the venue in my next editorial." "And you?" I blinked. "Me? You're the kind of planner people should know. The kind who can take someone else's chaos and turn it into magic, even when the bride's family doesn't see it." 2 weeks later, the article dropped. Eliza Morgan, the quiet force behind the year's most luxurious wedding venue. And there, in digital ink for the world to see, was my face. Not in the background, not blurred behind a bouquet, but front and center. I didn't post about it. I didn't gloat. But I knew Camilla saw it. Because 3 days later, a package arrived at my office. Inside, a small silver frame. One of the photos from the wedding. Me, adjusting her train. Her smiling, radiant, untouched by reality. There was no note, just the picture, as if to remind me of my place. But this time I smiled, because even in the photo where I looked like her servant, she would always know who was really holding it all together. And now, the world knew it too. 3 weeks after the wedding, Camilla's carefully curated illusions started to slip. It began with a whispered comment at a charity gala she attended with Jeremy. Someone mentioned the Emberlight article, how impressive it was that Eliza had launched such a powerful brand. And suddenly, the people who used to hover around Camilla started drifting toward another conversation, toward the name that was rising fast in the event world. Mine. I didn't even attend the gala. I didn't have to. Word of mouth had done the heavy lifting. And in Camilla's world, where perception was currency, it was the beginning of bankruptcy. She tried to claw it back. Photo shoots with rented gowns. A podcast interview where she rambled about The importance of vision in event planning, never once mentioning the real architect behind her wedding. But the tide had turned, and then came the first email. From her new mother-in-law. Subject line, a concern. It landed in my inbox at 6:13 p.m. on a rainy Thursday. Eliza, I hope you're well. I wanted to reach out personally and clarify a few things that have come to my attention regarding the wedding. There seems to be some confusion over who is truly responsible for the coordination. I know Camilla mentioned that you were simply assisting, but from what I've now heard and read, it seems the truth is quite different. I stared at the screen. She wasn't accusing me, she was apologizing. Camilla's new family, the one she'd married into for status, reputation, and connections, was beginning to see the cracks. And through them, they saw me. I replied with grace. Professional language. A brief note thanking her for reaching out and offering any clarity she needed. No sarcasm, no bitterness. But I knew what this meant. Camilla was bleeding credibility. The next blow came a week later. Jeremy's company was hosting a networking brunch at, ironically, one of the sister properties to Emberlight's venue. He had always been proud of Camilla's connections, had boasted that she handled logistics like a pro. But this time, the organizer called me. Eliza, would you be available to oversee the brunch? I heard you're the one who actually made the wedding work. I blinked. Isn't Camilla planning it? A pause. She tried. It didn't go well. So I accepted. When I showed up that morning, clipboard in hand, hair pulled back, dressed in muted charcoal gray, Camilla was already there. Her smile froze when she saw me. She rushed over, voice low but sharp. You weren't supposed to be here. I was hired, I said simply. You should speak to the coordinator. This is my husband's event, she hissed. Then maybe you should have made sure it didn't fall apart before it started. Her eyes narrowed. You're doing this on purpose. I leaned closer so only she could hear. No, Camilla. You did this to yourself. I just stopped cleaning up after you. She stormed off, and once again, I got to work. I made the brunch run smoothly. Guests complimented the layout, the timing, the presentation. Someone said, Camilla, you've outdone yourself. And Camilla, frozen between ego and truth, just smiled weakly. She never corrected them, but I didn't need her to. Because now everyone was beginning to know the truth without my help, and I hadn't even revealed the biggest secret yet. Because the final twist, the one she would never recover from, was still coming. The brunch was just the beginning. What followed was a slow, humiliating unraveling for Camilla. Her in-laws, once charmed by her polished exterior, began to see what lay beneath. She had always been good at wearing masks, at playing the perfect daughter, the perfect fiancée, the perfect hostess. But masks only work when no one tugs at the seams. And now, the seams were splitting. The guests whispered. Jeremy's mother, formerly her biggest supporter, began attending events without her. Rumors began to circulate, soft at first, then louder, that Camilla had taken credit for an entire wedding planned by someone else. That she had humiliated her own sister in public while building her fantasy on the back of someone else's work. People called it poetic, but to me, it was personal. And then something landed in my lap that made everything shift. Our grandmother's will. Grandma Lorraine had passed away 2 years earlier. She had been the only member of the family who ever truly saw me. We had been close, though Camilla always acted like she barely existed beyond holidays. When the estate was originally settled, most of it had gone to my father. But there had been one small portion held in trust, a personal fund that would be awarded upon a milestone yet unrevealed. That milestone had arrived. The lawyer contacted me with a simple statement. You've triggered the clause. I blinked. What clause? The one your grandmother left in her handwritten amendment. She wrote, and I quote, the first of my granddaughters to independently establish and operate a business, without financial help or marriage, will receive my private shares in the hillside estate. I sat in silence. The hillside estate wasn't just land. It was legacy. 10 acres of prime wedding venue real estate. The same land Camilla had always dreamed of inheriting, hoping to one day turn it into a luxury bridal retreat. It had been her childhood obsession, her Pinterest board fantasy. And it was mine now. I didn't speak. I just signed. 3 weeks later, I walked the property, heels crunching in autumn leaves, the key in my hand. And I knew this was the moment the game changed forever. It didn't take long for Camilla to find out. The article in the local business journal made sure of that. Rising entrepreneur acquires historic hillside estate, planned launch of luxury event destination. The article didn't name her, but it didn't have to. The first line stung more than any insult I could have crafted. Eliza Morgan, the newly appointed owner of Hillside Estate, has rapidly become one of the most respected names in high-end event design. Known for her work behind Emberlight and other elite venues, Morgan's story of resilience, independence, and quiet triumph has become a symbol of modern female entrepreneurship. She saw it. She texted me, the first message in over a month. Camilla, you seriously took Hillside? Camilla, that was supposed to be mine. Camilla, you don't even care about that land. I read her words and remembered the girl who used to call me her backup plan, her shadow, her extra. Now she was begging for the very thing she thought I didn't deserve. I didn't reply. She called next. I let it ring. Then I received the email from her lawyer. It was a laughable attempt, a cease and desist citing conflict of interest and legacy intent. It claimed Grandma had always verbally promised the land to Camilla, that it was understood she would inherit it. The lawyer I hired replied with 3 sentences. The will is legally binding. My client has met all conditions. Kindly direct future communication to this office. And still, I wasn't done. Because now I had the land, and I had the clients, I had the name. But the most brutal revenge? I had the choice of who to allow on it, and her name wasn't on the list. Camilla showed up uninvited 2 weeks before the Hillside Estate's soft launch. I was overseeing the final touches on the garden ceremony space when I saw her standing at the edge of the gravel path, clutching a printed invite she clearly hadn't received officially. Her heels, those same sky-high stilettos she bragged about in bridal parties, sank into the freshly watered earth. She looked out of place, like a socialite who wandered onto sacred ground. "Eliza!" she called out, her voice tight, trying to sound neutral. But the slight tremble gave her away. I didn't break stride. I continued walking toward the glasshouse entrance, clipboard in hand, headset crackling as my assistant relayed updates from the kitchen staff. She followed me. "Eliza," she said again, louder now. "We need to talk." Finally, I stopped under the newly hung chandelier, surrounded by the scent of lavender, citrus polish, and fresh opportunity. I turned slowly, letting silence do most of the talking. "We don't need to talk," I said. "We've talked enough for a lifetime. But you never listened." She took a shaky breath. "You're punishing me?" "No," I said, calm and steady. "Punishment is emotional warfare. This this is called peace. Peace from your manipulation, from your passive-aggressive jabs dressed up as compliments, from being dragged along as your unpaid assistant, your prop, your +1 servant. I'm done." Her face flushed pink. This land, this venue, was my dream. I shook my head. "No, Camilla. It was Grandma's land, and she saw who deserved to carry it forward. You saw Hillside as a set piece for your fantasy life. I saw it as a place to build something real." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I just wanted you to be part of things." I laughed, quietly, but with a weight behind it. You wanted me close enough to serve, not to shine. There's a difference. She opened her mouth again, maybe to defend herself, maybe to cry. I couldn't tell. But then I stepped forward, my voice soft but final. I forgave you, Camilla, a long time ago. But forgiveness isn't an invitation to keep hurting me. It's a decision to heal, with or without you in my life. She blinked back tears. And by the way, I added, you're not banned because I hate you. You're not welcome because this time I'm choosing myself. At that moment, one of the estate staff approached. I gave a gentle nod. Please walk Ms. Camilla to her car, quietly, respectfully. This is still a sacred place. She stood frozen, pride cracking like porcelain. But eventually she turned, heels wobbling in the gravel, and let herself be led away. No paparazzi, no screaming scene. Just a woman realizing too late that the girl she once called invisible was now the woman who held every door. And she was standing on the wrong side of it. As I watched her disappear beyond the trees, the sun dipped low over hillside, casting golden light across the lawn. I breathed in deeply, not as someone who'd won a war, but as someone who'd finally come home, to her own story, written in her own name. The morning of the Hillside Estates grand launch arrived, draped in perfection. The sky was a calm watercolor of soft blues and gentle golds, the kind of sky that looked like it had been painted just for new beginnings. As the sun stretched over the estate, the dew on the hedges shimmered like tiny diamonds, and a soft breeze swept through the trees, as if even nature was standing still in respect. I arrived early, long before the guests, long before the press, just to walk the grounds in silence. This place, once just a name whispered in family gossip or dangled in front of me like a carrot I'd never reach, now belonged to me, every brick, every vine, every echo of my grandmother's legacy. I stepped into the glass house and ran my hand along the polished railing, remembering how Camilla once sneered at me during her wedding rehearsal. Don't touch that, Eliza. Your fingerprints will show in the photos. Now my fingerprints were everywhere, and not one of them needed to be wiped away. By noon, the estate was alive with movement. Soft music from a string trio drifted through the garden. Staff moved in choreographed elegance, and trays of lavender macarons, chilled mimosas, and hand-lettered place cards turned a business launch into an elite social event. Journalists from 5 wedding magazines mingled with bloggers, influencers, and industry icons. Even a major cable network had sent a crew. The irony? I didn't pay for any press coverage. I didn't need to. The work spoke louder than the name ever had. As the guests arrived, I noticed something beautiful. They didn't look at me like I was someone's sister, someone's +1, someone's helper. They looked at me like I was her, the woman behind it all. Some approached to shake my hand. Some just smiled from afar, almost in quiet awe. One woman, an older planner from New York, took my hand and said, "You've done something rare, sweetheart. You made a space that doesn't just look good. It feels honest. Don't let anyone steal that from you." And still, somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew Camilla was watching. Whether she was sitting in her apartment refreshing social media, or parked down the road trying to catch a glimpse from behind tinted glass, it didn't matter. I no longer cared about her presence or absence. I wasn't performing for her anymore. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for, my speech. I stood under the old oak tree in front of the very people who used to look past me. This time, every eye was on me. Not because I demanded it, but because I'd earned it. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice clear, steady. When I first walked this property, it was just land, just history. But I saw something more. I saw the ghosts of women who were told to be quiet, to take up less space, to help instead of lead. And I promised them, and myself that I would turn this place into proof that we are more than support roles. The crowd was silent, breathless. My name is Eliza Morgan. I wasn't born the favorite. I wasn't the golden child. I wasn't the one everyone bet on. But I became the one who built something. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove myself right. A wave of applause rose. Not manufactured, not polite, but deeply felt. And just as I stepped off the small stage, Jeremy's mother approached me with a surprising softness in her eyes. She looked at me for a long moment before saying, "I've been to dozens of launches. This is the first one that made me feel something." She reached into her clutch and handed me a folded note. "From her," she said quietly. She didn't have the courage to bring it herself. I waited until the buzz of conversation returned, then stepped behind a row of gardenia shrubs and opened the note. Camilla's handwriting, rushed, uneven. "You won. I won't fight that anymore. You were always better. You just didn't scream about it like I did. Maybe if I'd ever stopped competing with you long enough to actually see you, I wouldn't be here writing this from a place of regret. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know, I finally see you. I just wish I had sooner." I read it twice, then a third time. And then I folded it, slid it into the silk pocket of my jacket, and exhaled. Because that's the thing about closure. It rarely comes as a dramatic apology. Sometimes it's a few shaky words scribbled in the shadow of everything that's already fallen. I didn't need her to grovel. I didn't need her to cry. I just needed her to understand that I was never standing in her shadow. I was quietly building my own light. And now the world could see it too. The days that followed the grand launch were a quiet kind of beautiful. Not the kind that shouted with fireworks or fanfare, but the kind that hummed with fulfillment, with peace. I walked the hillside estate alone the next morning, before staff arrived. The mist still clung to the grass, curling softly over the walkways like silk ribbon. Birds chirped like they were rehearsing for a wedding that hadn't been announced yet, and the sun peeked through the trees like a promise kept. There was no spotlight now, no crowd to applaud, no Camilla to compete with, just me. And the silence I had fought so long to earn. I sat beneath the old oak tree, the same one where I had spoken my truth just 24 hours earlier. My fingers grazed the bark, the rough grooves almost echoing the lines in my grandmother's worn journals. She used to write about this place, long before it became the battleground between me and my sister. In the pocket of my jacket was the note Camilla had written. I unfolded it one last time, letting her words settle over me like a closing door, not with anger, but with finality. She saw me now, but I had already moved on. And then something unexpected happened. An old man approached from the edge of the courtyard, slow, dressed in navy slacks and a wool cap. His gait was unsteady but purposeful. "Eliza?" he asked, voice gravelly but gentle. "Yes? I'm Joseph Mathers. I worked with your grandmother for 20 years, managed this property when she couldn't. She told me once, long before she passed, one day my shy granddaughter will own this land. She won't shout, she won't push, but she'll lead." Tears caught in my throat before I could stop them. "She saw this?" I asked. "She did," he nodded. "She just didn't know when you'd be ready." I nodded, unable to speak. Before he turned to leave, he handed me something. An old yellowed envelope, sealed in wax. "She left this for you. Told me not to give it to anyone but you, and not until the place felt like yours." My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter, written in her careful script. "My sweet Eliza, if you're reading this, it means you've made Hillside yours. Not just in name, but in spirit. I knew you would. You always had the quiet kind of strength, the kind the world overlooks, but not me. I saw it in you the moment you helped me sweep the garden path without being asked. I know Camilla tried to take up all the space in the room, but that's because she was afraid of what you might become if you ever realized you didn't need anyone's permission. I'm proud of her for many things, but I'm proud of you for all the things you did when no one was watching. This place is yours now, not because of blood, but because of soul. And one day, when the time is right, pass it to someone who reminds you of yourself, not someone loud, but someone who listens, who cares quietly, who dreams in silence and builds with both hands. With love forever, Grandma Lorraine. I pressed the paper to my chest and cried, not because I was broken, but because I was whole. In that moment, I didn't feel like the forgotten daughter. I didn't feel like the shadow behind Camilla's spotlight. I felt like the woman I had fought to become. And for once, the story didn't end with a betrayal or a breakdown or a bitter scene. It ended with legacy, with roots, with a woman standing in the place where she was once made to feel small, and now watching the world grow from the seeds she planted herself.